Hi, thank you all for coming. And excuse I have a frog in my throat. But I wanted to welcome you all to the second in this year's Poem Present series. We'll be hosting Jennifer Moxley today and tomorrow. She'll be reading from her work today, her poetry today, and tomorrow she'll be giving a talk.
Jennifer Moxley is the author of 5 books of poetry and 2 translations and a memoir. Her books of poems include Imagination Verses from 1996, The Sense Record from 2002, Off in Capital, a collection of earlier chapbooks published in 2005, The Line, published in 2007, and most recently a book also on flood called Clampdown, which I know that they have copies of at the bookstore. She's also the author of 2 translations from the French of Jacqueline Risset, Sleep's Powers and the Translation Begins, and has written the introduction for Nicole Brossard, the Québécoise poet Nicole Brossard's selections out on California's Poets of the Millennium series, forthcoming. I don't know when it will be out. Forthcoming.
Any second.
Any second. She is also the poetry editor of The Baffler, which is resurgent, soon to be relaunched. I first read Jennifer's work in 2003 here at the University of Chicago in a class taught by Orrin Eisenberg called Radical Poetics. And I was immediately captivated as well as puzzled by the conflicted tenor of her song. Here was a voice that seemed unassimilable to any of the dominant contemporary poetry traditions, or rather seemed to alternate among several of them at different times, and even to occupy several of them at once. Yeats famously said that we make out of the quarrel with others rhetoric, of the quarrel with ourselves poetry. Jennifer's lyric voice is in perpetual quarrel with itself, and the result is a poetry of breadth and breathtaking precision. Here's the beginning of my favorite of her poems, The Sense Record, the title poem of the book of that name. Under the threat of another light downpour, Eros, soaked by the rainwater, spoke to the sentient flowers. Sadness, no longer extraneous, began the derangement of nerve, bypassed the bleeding heart to pierce the blood-brain barrier. This all en route to the 2-car garage. I was worn with the labor that augurs despair, life in the futile percentile, when past my squeamish eyelash, buffeted by scallops, of small will the slightest fairy brushed. My rubber soles conformed to the stones as I followed and spied the backyard starlet allongée on an orange blossom, delicate beside the drinking bees, blithe amidst sharp blades of grass, a raindrop seductress, entertaining ants on the folding lip of a pinkster leaf. Jennifer Moxley painstakingly alternates between affirming the desiring life made most vividly available by art and using a critical art to assess the most remote consequences of our forms of desire. This turns out to be a poignant way to keep in view the costs of our affections, while confirming the validity and the inevitability of our emotional life and its lyric record. Echoing Wallace Stevens, she says she is content when she does not think the disclosure of love is a weakness. And in today's poetic climate, such a contentment like such a disclosure should not be valued too lightly. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Moxley.
So what I'm going to do, thank you for inviting me here. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start by reading some poems from my new book, Clampdown. And then I'm going to move to new work. And I'm going to read a few shorter poems. And then I'm going to finish with a longer poem as my final poem. The Price of Silence. It's very early in the century. We are awake, like a futureless youth tired from a night of dreary drinking. The sun warms the synthetic bedspread, hoary with sprouts of nylon thread. Its topography of occasional craters, formed by errant burning cherries, bespeaks the vintage of its dying surface. Who will benefit from the use of such things? Is there coffee being made in the kitchen, wafting up the stairway, now carpeted in plush rose fibers, once a well-worn maple with a squeak around step 3? Are there eggs sizzling on the stove, a smooth blueprint of linen across an old wooden breakfast table, clean utensils slightly tarnished, fresh cream in a cream-colored creamer a little mottled with attractive cracks, austere dreams of outdated poetry? The century has just begun. Shall we roll over and go back to sleep? Such an impossibility. The time it takes to maintain these things we've worked so hard to gain. As to grow a tree. Who has it? Let us sleep a while longer. We shall dream of the sober aesthetics of an old stone farmhouse, the quiet as it sounds in religious contrast to a lovingly crafted grandfather clock. Wake up! Supper has been prepared, but by whom? It's mysteriously delicious and wholesome besides. But let's not forget the naughty bit. A milkmaid astride the knees of an undertaker. Toothless, disowned relations vulgarly hawking our beloved trousseau. Just punishment for our haughty treatment of the downstairs workers all these years. A ghostly cloud of beige pressed powder drifts from the maw of a silver compact, which sits on a doily atop an armoire in the master's bedroom, the master whose servants all ran away. Is the new century a failure locked in an image to which we don't have access? Things are happening out of spite. The exhaustion is one of heat, sticky skin against the texture of aggressively pilled flannel sheets. Shall we meet again? I'm off to where the job takes me, and you? To a downtown revival in a stucco mall. Beautiful austerity, Europe after the fact. It still works nicely in poetry, like worshipping outdated gods. We wish light flooded into this century as light once used to do, a warm aura of color against a cold interior, a Hammershoy painting from which we are barred, trapped here as we are with the waste of an outdated system, in a landscape bereaved by unusual weather. It is suffocating beneath this vinyl window, in whose fake glued-on mullions we see a cross, but it doesn't mean anything. No word can be uttered or kept in store to chant us out of losing. The whir of the washing machine as it pours detergent down the sewer pipes, chlorine rising up from the drains. The compact fluorescent bulb in the gooseneck lamp with a broken spring neither mutters nor sputters playfully. Things don't speak our distance. The phone, though loud, tinny, and insistent, cannot, it seems, be found. We oppress in a way we cannot pay for, in any direct or meaningful way. All is fake. Why should we awake? This next one is called Friday Night, Candles Out. I went to the Art Institute this morning, and I had this overwhelming impression that everyone was really thin. I think I've been living in rural Maine too long. So, like, I haven't seen so many thin people. They're so fashionable and thin. Anyway, there is a relevance to that comment to this poem, which is it's sort of about a fantasy that I'm having while I'm in a house in Maine. Friday night candles out. Cocktail hour. No, Friday night candles out. Apologies. Rain dampens the silence, pings against the detached drain pipe, which, as if driven by brittle pride to incline toward an old connection, lies dutifully beside the house. Late morning gloom. Winter has not yet properly arrived. Preparations are useless, as is wishing. My cue to head back to the white-carpeted apartment and mix the cocktails for my guests. I find them, just as I left them, a stupor or two ago, laughing and tossing crisp witticisms weightlessly around the room. Gay flirtations effortlessly animate the gestures. Of course we adore each other. We're terribly happy just to be here. With you warm beside me, this vision drifts. It's Saturday morning. No need to get up, except to catch up, which is impossible, so I let it go. Actually, there was no party, last night or any other, in an old room with a wood floor, twin gray rays of extinguished flame curled up from the dining room table at the end of our evening meal. Roast chicken, carrots braised with thyme, potatoes mashed with butter, milk, and a negligible grating of nutmeg, cool water, and red wine. I remember feeling a hollow failure at the particularity of these pleasures. In the presence of too much absence, nothing is ever right. Memory chambers, distractedly filling the empty seats, stopped to listen, while you repeated with empathy a minor item from the day's news. Apparently, an anachronistic soldier cut in the patent mold. A believer in patriotism, honor, and duty, became so shattered by the war's profit motive that he denied himself the luxury of taking another breath. Or did he? Perhaps, though above the shooting gallery of toy civilians, he too was a victim. The private sector mercenaries ride roughshod over espousers of eroded nobility as well as the merely weak. So then, is murder the only response befitting the templates of orphaned belief? These thoughts and the memory of the tragic soldier stifled the reverie of my fantasy party. I couldn't go back there now. Numb, I drifted off, hoping for snow, and dreamt of garlands, soft boughs of white pine tied up with attractive wine-colored bows. But then an army of impoverished ghosts started to pound at my window, begging entry and a place at the table of our upcoming Christmas Eve feast. They were a holy book, a midwinter document of mounting destruction, written in the heat of their final breaths, blown out while they, eyes blank to the sky, imagined a country of freeborn men. This next one is called The Quest, and it has an epigraph, a very famous line from Jack Spicer. The Grail is the opposite of poetry. The Quest. The lie is that we'll recognize the winners beforehand, that beautiful souls destined for happiness appear all set about with stars. The lie is that after years of darkness, the exegesis of any desiccated hermit will serve to alleviate our bewilderment. They point, you, but not you. There is hope for you, but you should give up and turn back. Providence has decreed you shall have no adventure. The arc of grace, a mystical exit from the trap of birth chance and bloodlines, call it talent or perhaps obedience. Mostly, we are poor. The winner, whether born in a forest to a controlling mother or the bastard of a love-sick champion, masters retrospection. The lie is that the true of heart will win, while the rest of us, corroded with sin, will die in a heap outside the stadium. Nobody can see beneath appearances. The lie is in the face, afflicted with sterile humility, while sure of its special seat. This partial liberty renders the ethical sense a joke. What self-flattery to think all destiny can lie at a fork in the road. In the end, nothing is certain, except that those who seek their own salvation will betray their brethren. And the last poem I'm going to read from Clampdown is the last poem in the book, and it's called Where To? Where To? I've written imitations, thought long and deeply over models, delving into wordscape mysteries, seeking keys to animate swirls of alternative lives entombed in the pulp of dead trees, signatures of once bright insight, a ghastly, ghostly business. They do not consent to my friendship, and I, in return, give nothing. I am but a host these few years on earth. The author's spirit in me lives locked up. Can you imagine that? Erased by this prison illusion, I wander from task to task, head in a box, a shell self, a flat surface in forced 3 dimension. I long to be laid down, reduced or filled, to fall on my knees, to plead the return of the lost benevolence I powerfully suspect exists, and once saw, I think, but can't remember. The senses shrivel up. Leave us be, they cry. Cups of skin creep over eyes, nose, ears, mouth. This loathing without recourse is tasteless love excess, turned sour, inward, sewn up. Painstaking duty tracery calms the bursting forth, which is crying, a boxed cat shaking, crazed by the cramp of no care but kind words. No, this dampened life-will is no irrational spate. It is crystal sanity trapped in sad okays, in especial safety, before and after, in knowing knowledge the soul's sustenance, and knowing all knowledge must be undone. All right. Now I'm going to read some new work. I have some Chloraseptic in my purse if you like. This is called No Place Like. Is the sound still okay back there? Yeah, okay. No Place Like. Never a prophet at the curb of what was once called home. Insidious word, prohibition. Never a prophet in the adopted land, ill-fitting itself into the familiar, wandering among signposts and lawns, dreaming of the lost Eden, touched, trying to find the insidious word and warmth, like loyal lassie risking her life by swimming the rushing Tweed, half dead, mud-drenched and bone-tired, a dog fugitive from booted cruelty, whips and chains, lying flat beside the kindly cottage for the kindly old couple to find. Would that Dame May Whitty lay beyond this row of imposing doors. They lie, you know. Down Main Street, hoping to share her milky ration, a methodical brushing, and words, soothing, sweet, oft repeated, there, there. When in Rome, Berlioz thought only of Paris, though she had jilted him and wrote to say so. When he crossed the border, the masters gathered to wave their hands, good riddance. Keep your exhausting brilliance at a handsome distance. Born in the South, he chose the city that bespoke his symphonie fantastique, streets to match the grandeur of a young man's extravagant enterprise. But instead of praise, he was greeted with paranoia, silence, brutal confusion. When in Paris, I thought only of you, sitting in a park, etc., the warmth of the sun on black tights, palm knowledge in Balboa Park, longing for the comfort of a known address stenciled on the curbside. But all my blood ties were by that time undone, and I could not return, except by resume, and failed, unloved, or so it felt, by what refused me in its history. Scenes in which our memories are set resist us with their silence. Better not to seek them out, better to stay away. There is an uncanny sadness that comes from driving through memorized streets with no hope of seeing someone you know, the incognito of long absence, a stranger in a land that is not strange, surrounded by ghosts who tempt your sanity with their silhouette feet. Once it was you who walked the borders of these ant-filled cracks, launched fairy dreams, stains, a massacre or two. The intimacy of sidewalks embarrasses. Though there's been no angelic change, it is as if you never existed, as if Lassie finally made it back, only to find the cottage crumbling, the boy taken, moldering in an unmarked grave. No, that's not it. It is as if Lassie finally made it back, but turned out to be mistaken. There never had been a cottage, or a boy, only a desolate mangy stray's invented dream of welcome, everything risked for the imagined hearth. We can remember where we put our things and still manage to lose them. Berlioz loved not in Paris, resented for offering a brightness to match the great cities, which turn small town when confronted with genius, abuse their need for sure bets, want the momentous after the fact. Me, out of place on a beach, at home, at sunset, asleep in a room I've rented, unknown, both here and there, there. Have you guys seen Lassie?
Yes.
It's like it's the most devastating film, right?
Old Yeller is pretty bad.
I didn't see it as a child, so when I saw it as an adult, it's a parable about a runaway slave, basically, right? This next poem is called Not That, Disappointment. I am inappropriate. I feel it in every said thing, in every enthusiasm, desire, wish, but mostly in every unsettling ambition. I live for the light in the dark of history, the ease of accomplishments after the fact. It will all seem inevitable after the fact. The irritable need to remove the disturbance of how I am failing in so many ways, and, having lost myself and their values, the distance between you and me is abolished. Might I speak to you in the quiet of your tower? 1571, the reader replaces the dead. 1919, the dead speak to the writer, of ambitious verticality, a mind that prefers conversation with vanished spirits and the not yet living. When I think of it, I too would like to become a father late in life, to awaken to the sweetly sour dewiness of infancy, dozing at the foot of my toasty bed. The room's vacancy, now filled with the emptiness of past bedrooms, would be filled with a child's potential. I would write poems to that potential. I would shut out the world and think only of it. It would be a literary desire, a dream not of structure but of substance. We can play at structure, can play at it, build categories of welcome that yet remain empty, while substance becomes a book, a desk, a library. The leisure to imagine that in talking to God, the whole of history might listen in. There you are, against a beautiful backdrop, standing sober in velvet, holding a discarded book, aware of the cool air on your skin, oblivious to the forces that would block your journey. If they knew the extent of your inappropriate ambition, Baldwin in the Harlem Stacks, raging against his stepfather. A glorious resistance to a deadening system becomes you, down on your knees, resigned to embodying a shattered sequence of a broken soul in a broken tower, the dream of the child at the foot of the bed, asleep, that is yourself. This next poem is called, I didn't bring like a timepiece, but I think I picked it. There is a bird song at the root of poetry. And I wrote it for Anne Lauterbach, who I've been exchanging letters with. And I think it has an image that's kind of hard to follow maybe by ear, so I'll just sort of say, this is a line coming from a letter Duncan wrote to Levertov, and he says, there is a bird song at the root of poetry. And I got kind of really interested in that idea of a song, a bird's song in the place that a root would be, which is underground. So that's sort of the image that I'm trying to develop in the poem. Hemmed in by an untenable image, feathers planted below fragile branches of avian feet, scaly crossroads scoring a particular blue of sky, offending through the uselessness of misplaced forms, thorny prongs that make no sense and yet belong on the ground, out of which the bird wings stiffly jut, rigid as rhubarb leaf. Rising from out the muffled beak, sight of a perverse smothering, throated core submerged. Should you kneel the body's aged mechanism beneath the shade of dry feathers? Should you place the vulnerable cavern of ear, trembling passage to psyche's failures, our fall into suffering, knowledge? Should you listen, you will hear the wasted strains of an underground song, deadened by thoughtless depths, but alive, for the dead have kept it, safe from false music, a ghoulish guard of love, safe from she who, bullied by the cruelty of others, the false sophistication of fashionable libraries, the envy of those who would molest the world into false confessions and banish all mystery with their dripping candles, who would unearth the bird song to cage it, she who will end by destroying what she loves most. Shh, quiet, listen. It is drawn by other amblers. It strains awake in our attentions as a sudden, bewildering happiness, ear wedded to earth. Listen and hear what those who know all cannot. This one I'm going to read because it's almost Halloween, and it's a Halloween poem called The Conjuring. I like writing occasional poems, and I think it might be a problem, because in Clampdown I realized there's like 3 Christmas poems. What can you do? I have Hardy as a precedent for that, so I think that's pretty good. This is on listening to Duncan talk. So many of you may have heard him talk. He's a very particular talker, and he's just a talker in a time in which one could talk for a very long time, and he even talked longer than most at that time. We had a conference in Maine a couple years ago on the 70s, and Bernadette Mayer was there with Clark Coolidge to give a reading, and she joked with him about how in the 70s they would try to read it so long that people would be driven away, and she threatened the room with this at this conference, and I realized how out of fashion that kind of gesture was. It was like this horrible thing. But I have heard stories of people from the day who said Duncan would sometimes talk for like 4 hours, you know. But people could smoke and have a glass of wine and get up and leave and come back, and so it was also different, much less formal. Okay, anyway, enough. The Conjuring, on listening to Duncan talk. On the eve of All Hallows, I ask your forgiveness. I am weak from not enough talking, calmed by your hysterical voice, which is, as I imagine it, excitedly talking to me from across death's threshold, as I imagine it. In silence, dead voices awake, and I hear the occasional laugh, throat clearing, gruff cough, guffaw, rows of exhaustion and impolitic boredom. Even those who are interested fake boredom, since delight in such things will estrange the mean. The fatigued body blocks the ear, but recorded intelligence remains, the intense loneliness of its accretion bursting forth in the thrill of the formal occasion, the invitation to finally speak the full content of your mind. Through time and tape no limit but time. From beyond the grave the gray corpse, as I imagine it, piped through with mayonnaise, sweet processed meats, lettuce, and salted potato chips. What a thrill to hear you say lettuce, standing in the midst of your ill-kept garden. I am nourished in the solitude of unanswerable questions. They are more real to me now than family or youth. The ego faded, the record crooked, the horizon blurred with varieties of belief. A search across the dangerous scale, miles of pitch interstate signed by warnings, lit by a turnip lantern, heaven above, hell below. The limbo of promising blacktop. Through the darkness, your erudition echoes up the coast. The mystery of legendary patterns awaken in the feeble homage of an humble ear hungry for the trued voice. To get that slight twist in the word homosexual, as only you knew to say it, preserving the thrilling failure of it. How can it be wrong to outwit the devil, even if drawn down below in the act? The body's boredom turns us dumb. Come to me whilst I sleep. Save me from death by persnickety correction. I have so many questions, and I am not afraid of the dark anymore. I've been open-eyed in it far too long. I am not afraid of the dark. My eyes have been open to it for so long, calling forth trace forms in the chalky denseness, a tour of your bright mind, like a jack-o'-lantern, that legendary symbol of dubious welcome awaiting in the wind of a mid-century porch. Threatening the candle fire, I feel I might suffocate under the folds of this white sheet, stumbling my way along the highway, seeking the final permission. Dividend of the social opt-out. How lovely it is not to go, to suddenly take ill. Not seriously ill, just a little under the weather. To feel slightly peaked, indisposed, plagued by a vague ache or a slight inexplicable chill. Perhaps such pleasures are denied to those who never feel obliged, if there are such. How pleasant to convey your regrets, to feel sincerely sorry but secretly pleased to send them on their way without you, to entrust your good wishes to others, to spare the equivocal its inevitable rise. How nice not to hope that something will happen, but to lay on the couch with a book, hoping that nothing will. To hear the wood creak and to think. It is lovely to stay without wanting to leave. How delicious not to care how you look, clean and uncombed in the sheets, to sip brisk mineral water, to take small bites off crisp saltines, to leave some on the plate, to fear no repercussions, nor dodge the unkind person you bug. Even the caretaker has gone to the party. If you want something, you will have to get it yourself. The blue of the room seduces. The cars of the occupied sound the wet road. You indulge in a moment of sadness, make a frown at the notion you won't be missed. This is what it is. You have opted to be forgotten, so that your thoughts might live. And then I'm going to finish with this longer poem. I think that I'm finding that something about academia is hard for long poems, like the workshop. You know, the student comes in with a 20-page poem, everybody freaks out, you know, you don't have time to look at it. And the reading, you know, these little small. So I've been wondering about how that shapes what we write, because I've been working in longer forms. Anyway, this poem is called Coastal, and it's for the painter Monique Van Genderen, who is the painter who did the cover of my second book, The Sense Record, that Michael mentioned in his introduction. And she paints, this is sort of, she calls herself a painter, but she doesn't just use paint, she uses strips of vinyl, big long strips of vinyl, so there's a lot of reflective surface on the painting. So I mentioned that so that you know what I'm talking about. Coastal, for Monique. 1. Your lover claimed that in Los Angeles nothing felt changed. And now, as California melts down with wildfires and fiscal crisis, I feel irritated at its dominance, hogging the airwaves and votes. It's like a war out there, you wrote, speaking not of the budget shortfall, but of being an old artist in a young business. But we're only middle-aged, I thought, an unromantic stage. Today the sky is the color of Henry Fonda's eyes, bright, crisp, and principled, as if no time had passed, or as if the same September sky from 8 years ago this day decided to reappear. That morning, which feels both far and near, I walked with a red-faced blonde from a climate-controlled classroom across the grass to the airless environment of Neville Hall, cinder-block walls, vinyl floors, and damaged acoustical ceiling tiles stained with yellow-brown spots. Caedmon was in my ear. Now let us praise Heaven Kingdom's guardian, the measurer's might and his mind plans. A partially opened office door cast light geometry on the floor. Steve was on the phone with my brother, atypically calling from San Francisco at 11 in the morning. Gesturing, he mouthed the words, a plane, etc., and then the no-way-back expression of gradual understanding slowly edged with dread. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4. How long does it take to know what is not lived but told? Perched on a chair, the breath recalibrates. Detailed questions begin. The image, a biplane leaving an I-beam, disabused by a small black-and-white TV, perched on a file cabinet in the lounge. The 2 tours Vietnam vet hired to teach composition, raging through the hall, thrilling with the fear that he might be called back to active duty. I hadn't seen such fierceness in him since his can of strawberry Slim Fast went missing from the communal fridge. The hungry turn bestial, roar against reason. After depositing my bag in Steve's office, we left the stifling building. It was a beautiful day, incredibly beautiful, exactly like today, or like those days I had in abundance growing up in California, cool, crisp mornings, warming to 70 degrees, a breeze with a slight chill to it if you are sitting still in the shade. Classes were canceled for the remainder of the day. On the way out, a man passed us, cackling and shouting, "This is absurd!" A disquisition quite distinct from the worried and quiet acknowledgement we met in most faces. His "You're all fools" echoed loudly as he charged toward the fire doors, a woman nodding behind him, hurrying to keep a pace. The world seemed mute, a backdrop, too perfect. Chickadee chirps echoed against it, but seemed fake, like a nature tape loop. We did not hear them, blocked by the loud buzz of what-ifs, the deafening hum of the stunned structure, the me of belief underneath our feet, yoked into the juggernaut we. 2. It was like it was just something on TV, your lover said. We watched the news in disbelief, but then life went on as usual. The usual of 2 women lovers caught up in the LA art world. It was only a few months before this that I had sat across a table from you, sipping the honey peach of a rich sauterne, so jet-lagged and mastered by Valium that everything seemed a dream. The next morning, sitting amidst the eucalyptus debris of your tiny backyard, I was felled by the incredible warmth. I thought the sun could burn away the entirety of my existence, stunned as I was by the surreality of being so thoughtlessly content. After the war, you also wrote, "The other night my friend had a party. There was skateboarding in someone's studio on a home-built ramp. After many cocktails, I have quite a few wounds." It would have sounded incredible had I not walked the gala galleries of the super rich in your company. But this isn't right. I have edited out the freeway deadfall, the sound barriers beneath the brown haze. Vignettes of contrast serve self-pity, a cock tease to the happiness contract I am always promising to honor if somebody, not me, makes everything change. Besides, I'm exaggerating. Your studio is a dark garage down a canyon road lit by artificial light. We are trying, both of us, to make work that matters, to remain true to that initial commitment. Artifice, dialogue, beauty, a letter to a friend. This glamorous isolation is killing me. I cannot accompany you into the abstract, but grow more narrative by the year, saying things to get them said, feeling no leisure to take old risks. 3. Episodes. The drizzle demands a change of plan. No day, no hour, not even a second can be adequately written in one sitting. The occasion is over, but the poem continues. Keys fly, but the chore of recording the facts still fails the story. What description can match that fraction of morning consciousness that floats free of identity? These past few days it has been occupied by Joe, returned to shatter my nebulous pleasure and fill the gap with a fetal cramp, impulsive, wet, and infantile. I want to be cared for in that way, to bury my head in her polyester lap, to risk her impatience with my half-baked adulthood. An elegant maturity without responsibility, the babyhood of ladies. I remember the letter in which you expressed your anger at those who deigned to hoard parents, to stay untroubled by death. There is such a light out, gray brightness, gold leaf storm clouds, to excite the wardrobe deep in the green of the pines. The desert offers no such options, even when millions of gallons of water are piped in from distant rivers. This morning I envy you a broad material surface on which to really stretch out, the tangible space you press against. My words will not reflect the sun, nor conjure watery moods, not here in this study. A study is not like a studio. It is a cramped place filled with the mind's idiosyncratic props. Visitors are not welcome. A studio invites everyone in, made things unabashedly court flirtatious comment, proud to be in progress. Have 8 years sunk down in the furniture, settled in winter, aged the ways, the initial impulse having become the plodding pleasures of vocation, always so difficult to share? Poetry is a team sport. You cannot play it alone. To quote the great poet of company, beautiful embellishment of fellowship, or the acknowledgement that all of our words come from the very same store. Whether multinational or a dinner invite, I think of company as something you work for. In its absence, I cling to its promises with a childlike faith in mutual understanding, when in fact, even in childhood, one kid was always the boss. Once your belief in humanity vanishes, all time becomes borrowed, the slightest freedom, luck. Is privilege, therefore, the surreptitious mission and final end of human rights? The poem should not ask such question. The poem should not ask such questions, chirps the goldfinch from the window. Plumage is all. Like your canvas colors, yellows, blacks, and grays, suggesting an abstract flower, a record of your gestures. I edit the pulse of my mind. Distraction dominates me. Even the punctured shimmer of a revelation needs at least an afternoon to become established. Things must be shaped by thought to matter. I have written this all before. A fine dust sphere settled that day and stifled the demands. No more face-to-face. Now, out in California, the professors are getting angry. Not about the war, which for those of us not directly involved seems to have faded into a sort of brutal muzak murmuring in the distance. The professors are mad about pay cuts. Will the regents bankrupt the one tier of education California is good at? As unreal to me as the bisexual Berkeley orgy, the nubile soup I have been reading about in agonized letters from West Coast friends, I think, I envy those University of California professors. Here in Maine we are only paid, but wait, this is boring, says the kitten, leaving a string at my feet. Motivation should come from the quest, you know, the one infused with wrenching nostalgia and the loss of all your friends. Nothing like a piece of string to focus the attention, or a line of poetry snaking down the length of the page, tempting me to taste the sweetness of the body's pulse and risk expulsion from this moment into a fogged sprint toward a sheer drop. Clarity of vision is the gift you get once you have started to fall. 4. The option to refresh existence by returning to patterns established in youth bores me. Youth bores me. I cannot be excited by watching others learn things for the first time. And the thing is, there really is no first time in learning. Like flimsy paper register receipts on windy supermarket parking lots, revelations rest for only a second before being whisked off for good. What seems so crucial when first grasped is just as quickly forgotten. I know unscientifically that many of my ideas tried to get in for many years before I actually let them. This did not happen out of stubbornness, but out of a misplaced loyalty to a past I was always catching up with. Defending defunct ideas that changed me, as though they were people in the room I might unwittingly offend. I do not want to go back to the beginning, to that litany of shameful moments and unearned self-assurance, the bluster of an attitude, flesh quivering with chaotic feeling. I am glad that phase is over. No, you're not, says Humpty Dumpty, sitting soiled on the shelf, acting the Renaissance egg. So then, shall I be reawakened, like a British spinster in the overdone plotline, whose clit is coaxed out of hiding by some swarthy peasant while she's on holiday? The trajectory is as follows. Unedited youth moves to gradual repression, with one final bounce back, then reconciliation with the aging lover you thought a stranger until you realize he's your best friend. But it is all a lie. Men trade in for new models, and why not? The rates are good, and though others click their tongues, secretly they are impressed. Some even call it love. What they do not tell you is that the slow warming of the same body over the same flame for many years is the more various option, not the less. It is easier to hit repeat and go back to the start than to find yourself in the middle for the very first time. The old are new to age, and so on, as it says in the famous poem. And how are you faring in your relationship? Monogamous bliss, lesbian sex death, or a life of high-drama French-style affairs? The little of your history I know leads me to think the latter. But then again, those who knew me when would probably think the same. And it is not true. I am not blue, just groping for examples. At your age, I know. But I grew up in a youth-obsessed region of a youth-obsessed culture, and so I lost some time. The late 60s and early 70s flipped everything around. They banned the hats and gloves once used to hide aged pates and liver spots, exposing adults as the affronts they are to the illusion of eternal youth. The Southern California sidewalks swarm with the surgically altered, dressed like children 24/7 in brightly colored clothes, walking ads for corporate aestheticism, masquerading as personal taste. Here in New England, it is an offense to God to think about your looks. Try it, and winter, Protestantism's greatest ally, will take you down a notch. 19th century loggers defied the weather and turned to the noble white pine to say, "Hey babe, looking good." Then they felled the beauty's self and left us only guessing. 5. Berkeley's nostalgia for its protests past trumps SoCal, where only a few professors laid down their pointers and headed out to the surf. The recession is not turning out to be great, nor the protests more than symbolic. Poems in recent journals have forgotten there's a world. That's a new trick, to leave the world out and yet still be political. Picasso painted hundreds of portraits of the artist, and none resembled him in the least. His alter ego was bearded and skinny with too long a torso, far from the round brown grandpa type mid-century delighted in thinking the icon of childlike painterly genius. You are a play of the eye, delineating an aesthetic pleasure located in color's relief. The effort you put in a temporary installation, a nod to the primacy of making, a thumb at market value. We all want to be valued, but not by false markers used to placate the ignorant scions of clarity, or people who can only love what they do not have to defend. A muggy sunny day, better for plants than people. Lift weights, the crows scream rhythmically through my window. Like catnip to kittens, it calms me down. As the poem travels through time, the anniversaries shift. It has been a year since men and women in dark blue suits left tall office buildings carrying cardboard boxes, bankers on parade. The perversity of virtual lives made real by exposure. If no one finds out that you broke the law, then are you really culpable? The Woody Allen school of morality. The above lines betray A Morning with Ray. Her scissored lines are the best cure for my retrograde romanticism. She has flown to Maine from my hometown to give a poetry reading. Your house is nicer than mine, she says, exhibiting her chronic, self-diagnosed divulging of the truth. But then again, she continues, mine is in California. 6. How would you like the politics in your poetry? How about in your painting? Romantic and sad, or smart and structural? Whatever your answer, you will leave here thinking you've done a little something for the good of mankind. But in this case, you'd be wrong. Oh, preachy, says the pencil sharpener, with its genuine claim to making points. For the last time, the name of the game is naming, not explaining, presenting the world whole in its overwhelming beauty from the vantage point of your sidelined authority. Anniversaries, the poem was saying, TARP, my mother's birthday, Vladimir Horowitz, exiled and in the closet, surrounding his piano with strong Marines. Every day is worth marking for something, though few can agree on what. Feeling panicky about going on so long, I show this to Steve in draft form. So this is your 9/11 poem? Echoes an oft-quoted line from Reds. With all that's going on in the world, why now? Because my older brother hasn't called me for months, as if inflated Bay Area real estate has swallowed him for good? Because my little brother is locked up with Hep C and the California prison system, too bankrupt to pay for health care? I don't know. There are reasons, but these aren't them. It was just a train of thought that started it. It was the fault of that beautiful sunny day, and me sitting out on the closed-in porch. Suddenly, I was wistful for those endless gentle mornings on the back steps of my home state, that head in the sand on the edge of time. A train of thought about a trainless state, though I've just heard the Golden Bear is making a grab for the bulk of government money set aside for high-speed rails. The hog that squandered its own economy hollering for more. How I long for you. Yet whenever I go back home, fate, the bully, yells at me with the same old story. You must take this surfboard and walk east until someone mistakes it for a canoe. Boo-hoo. 7. In school, I was told that poems only matter if rooted in the landscape. A baffling decree for an abstract art. At least you could sculpt if you really had to. I wrote about a sidewalk with a false sense of history, a 7-Eleven, and a chain-link fence. That was the past. Since moving to the outer edge of the almost forgotten, I have developed a loathing for the pride of regions. The local wants to distract you into forgetting that there is a world. I won't, I say, I won't, stamping my feet in place. As payback for my loathing of small ponds, I have been diagnosed with this one, sarcoidosis, the doctor says, a disease that clusters in central Maine. So now we both live in places that can cause our lungs irreparable harm. I think of Eva Hess breathing in her resin, or Rothko sopping walls with cheap gallons of hardware store paint, the off-gassing from your vinyl strips seeping into the lobby fabrics of the Renaissance Hollywood Hotel. Strange when cravings come and will not stand for substitutes. I get them for seeing art, not virtually, but in person. Online, your paintings lose their gloss to become as flat as these words, which can't even manage to dent the page or bump along the fingers. I cannot recall the feeling I get when looking at art I love. I must return to face it, to stand before it, to feel its effects, like the longing for a food you cannot reproduce. The patty melt, for example, which is completely unknown in these parts. Or so I discovered one frustrating day when, felled by a craving, I made Steve drive me to Denny's, from Denny's to Applebee's to Thank God It's Fridays, only to face dumbfounded looks from chubby hostesses clutching full-color laminate menus. The ache of a hunger for something you could once find right down the street. Why do I go on? Who cares that a middle-aged West Coast poet living in New England is craving a patty melt? I'll make her pay, thinks my colon, plotting its revenge. I know to take it seriously. Something about the fragility of existence came home to me. The evening of the day before my first procedure, I was only 43, cheated of 7 years scopy-free living by nonchalantly passing blood. What might this stand in for, metaphorically, I thought, as I lay on the couch, forcing myself to eat lemon jello. Schuyler pissing all over Paris had a kind of charm. A little boy qua blubbering sweetheart in love with hunks in life loses control in the Champs-Élysées, and we all feel a sense of relief. The poem has told its story, has spent its epistolary passions out of the loneliness of being trapped in a place that is so far from all of your friends. An inelegant sense of loss, mixed with my gratitude for bourgeois privacy, when I downed the 2-week dose of Fleet enema in a few short hours. The sensation was like gagging on seawater, or like all of the saliva of prehistory being concentrated in your mouth. When the body's content empties out, the you of convictions no longer exists. The poet of cultivated mystique, denied identity's protection, is just another sick person in a hospital bracelet willing to take orders. Gradually, I lost myself in this nightmare, which was a childhood fear. As the hours of the arduous tests progressed, I became more than unusually media vulnerable, and finally I all but vanished into the dubbed voices and lawless cruelty of once upon a time in the West. Thank you.